welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. It was a quiet Friday evening in the small town of Oak Ridge. I had just settled onto the couch, a half-empty bag of chips within arm's reach and my phone in hand. The sound of raindrops tapping against the window was oddly soothing. Outside, the storm had been picking up for the past hour, dark clouds rolling in like ominous waves on the horizon. The streetlights flickered intermittently, their glow dim and uncertain. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 8:47 p.m. For a while, I mindlessly scrolled through social media, ignoring the muted television in the background. It was one of those nights where nothing seemed urgent, where the world felt distant and the storm seemed like just another backdrop to my solitude. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with an intensity that startled me, the vibrations rattling against the coffee table. It wasn't a text or a notification from one of my apps. The screen lit up with bold, black and yellow text. Emergency alert. Lock all windows. Stay indoors. Do not investigate noises. I blinked at the message, unsure if it was real or some kind of prank. Oak Ridge wasn't exactly a hub of excitement. Most of the alerts we got were for the occasional tornado warning or a missing pet. But this was different. I reread the alert, my stomach sinking with each word. It didn't explain why we needed to lock the windows, which made it even worse. Was it a storm-related warning? A home invasion? Some kind of gas leak? My mind raced through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Curiosity got the better of me. I flipped over to a local news app, but there was no mention of the alert. Social media wasn't any more helpful. A few posts from people in town mentioned getting the same notification, but nobody seemed to know what it was about. A crack of thunder made me jump, the sound rattling the windows. I set my phone down and stood up, suddenly hyper-aware of how exposed my apartment felt. The blinds were open, giving me a clear view of the rain-soaked street outside. Across the road, I could see Mr. Hayes, my elderly neighbor, standing by his living room window, talking animatedly on his phone. I walked over to my window and pulled the cord to close the blinds. The room immediately felt darker, more confined. My fingers hovered over the lock on the window. For a moment, I hesitated, wondering if I was overreacting. But the alert's words echoed in my head. Lock all windows. With a decisive click, I turned the lock into place. I spent the next few minutes going room to room, checking every window. My apartment wasn't big, a modest one-bedroom on the second floor of an old brick building, but it felt like a labyrinth in that moment. The creak of the floorboards beneath my feet seemed louder than usual, the shadows in the corners of the rooms deeper. By the time I finished, my nerves were on edge. I returned to the living room and peered through the edge of the blinds. Mr. Hayes was still on the phone, gesturing with his free hand. His window was wide open, rain splattering against the sill. "Come on, man," I muttered under my breath. I considered calling him to warn him about the alert, but decided against it. He'd probably think I was paranoid, and besides, I wasn't even sure what I'd be warning him about. Still, unease gnawed at me. As I watched, a shadow moved across the room behind him. My heart skipped a beat. It was fast, almost too fast to register. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a reflection from a car passing by, maybe. But then it happened again, and this time it was unmistakable. Something or someone was in his house. I leaned closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass. "Mr. Hayes?" I whispered, though he was far out of earshot. He turned slightly, still oblivious, and laughed at something on the other end of the line. My stomach churned as I saw the shadow move closer to him, a dark blur against the warm light of his living room. And then it happened. In an instant, Mr. Hayes was yanked backward, disappearing from view. His phone clattered to the floor, the call still connected. I stared in disbelief, my mind struggling to process what I'd just seen. The rational part of me screamed for an explanation. Maybe he tripped. Maybe someone else was in the house and they were playing a prank. But deep down, I knew better. The way he'd been pulled, it wasn't natural. It was too sudden, too violent. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. The line rang and rang, but no one picked up. Panic bubbled in my chest. I tried again with the same result. My phone buzzed again. Another emergency alert flashing across the screen. Emergency alert. They are attracted to open windows. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my ears. Who were they? And why were open windows the trigger? A noise behind me made me spin around. It was faint but distinct. A soft tapping coming from the bedroom. For a moment, I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The sound came again, deliberate and rhythmic. Top, top, top. The bedroom window. I hadn't locked it yet. Adrenaline surged through me as I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and crept toward the bedroom. My footsteps were slow and deliberate, the floor creaking with each step. The tapping continued, louder now. When I reached the bedroom door, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The air felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't explain. I threw the door open, knife raised. The window was wide open. Rain poured in, soaking the floor and bed. The wind howled, carrying with it a faint whisper that sent chills down my spine. And then, just for a moment, I saw it, a figure, barely visible in the storm, standing just outside the window. It was tall and impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and glowing, hollow eyes. It tilted its head, as if it could see me. My instincts kicked in, and I slammed the window shut, locking it with trembling hands. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze burning into me through the glass. I backed away, my mind racing. Whatever this thing was, it was real, and it was here. The phone buzzed in my hand, another alert lighting up the screen. Emergency alert. Do not leave your home. The room felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. My heart thundered in my chest as I backed away from the bedroom window, knife still clutched tightly in my hand. The thing outside, the creature, wasn't moving, but its hollow, glowing eyes felt like they were drilling into my skull. I forced myself to breathe, the sound shaky and shallow. The emergency alert replayed in my mind. They are attracted to open windows. It wasn't just a vague warning, it was literal. And I had almost become a target. The creature finally moved. It stepped back from the window with an unnatural grace, its limbs bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. As it disappeared into the rain-soaked night, I stood frozen, gripping the edge of the doorframe for balance. My mind screamed at me to lock myself in the bathroom, to hide, to do anything but stand there like a deer in headlights. But then I thought of Mr. Hayes. Swallowing hard, I crept back to the living room window. The blinds were still closed, but I peeked through the slats, careful not to touch the glass. His house was dark now, no sign of movement inside. The phone he had dropped during his call lay on the floor near the window, its faint glow visible even from across the street. For a split second, I considered running over there. Maybe he was still alive. Maybe he needed help. But the thought of stepping outside into the storm, and into whatever that thing was, made my stomach churn. My phone buzzed again, another emergency alert flashing on the screen. Stay indoors. Do not investigate noises. The words felt personal, like the system somehow knew I was thinking of leaving. My fingers tightened around the phone as I stared at the message. If the alerts were this specific, it meant others had made the same mistake before me. The lights flickered in my apartment, dragging me back to the present. The storm outside was intensifying, the wind howling like a living thing. I glanced at the clock. 9:14 p.m. It hadn't even been 30 minutes since the first alert, but it felt like hours. As I watched, something moved near Mr. Hayes's house. A dark shape, taller than the average person, emerged from the shadows. It moved in that same unnatural way, its long limbs seemingly stretching and retracting as it walked. My breath caught as it stopped in front of the open window. The creature tilted its head, inspecting the room. Rain dripped from its skeletal frame, its glowing eyes scanning the darkness inside. Then, with a single, fluid motion, it reached through the window and disappeared inside. I stepped back from the blinds, my pulse racing. Whatever was happening over there, I didn't want to see it. Yet, I couldn't stop myself from glancing back. The faint glow of Mr. Hayes's phone was gone now, the light snuffed out as if it had been swallowed by the shadows. A sudden sound outside made me jump. A sharp, metallic screech, like nails dragging across a car door. I turned toward the noise, my grip on the knife tightening. It was coming from the parking lot below my apartment. Moving cautiously, I approached the window overlooking the lot. The rain blurred everything, but I could just make out the shapes of the cars below. One of them, a silver sedan, had deep gouges along its side, the metal twisted and torn. The air around it felt wrong, as though the storm itself were heavier there. That's when I saw it. A figure stood next to the car, its long fingers tracing the scratches it had made. Its body was hunched, its head nearly grazing the roof of the vehicle. Even through the rain, I could hear the faint tapping of its claws against the metal, a sound that made my skin crawl. It turned slowly, as if sensing my gaze. For a moment, I was frozen, unable to move. Then its head snapped up, those hollow eyes locking onto my window. I stumbled back, pulling the blinds shut with shaking hands. My chest felt tight, panic clawing at the edges of my mind. I had locked all the windows, hadn't I? My mind raced, replaying my frantic check from earlier. The living room, the bedroom, the bathroom, all locked. But the front door, a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I hadn't checked the front door. My apartment was on the second floor, and I'd convinced myself earlier that nothing would come in through there. But now, with that thing outside, I wasn't so sure. I crept to the door, each step feeling like an eternity. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. The lock on the door was in place, but the deadbolt wasn't. My stomach turned as I reached for it, fingers trembling. As I slid the deadbolt into place, a sound made me freeze. A soft, deliberate knock on the other side of the door. Sam. The voice was muffled but clear, dripping with familiarity. It was my mother's voice. Sam, it's me. Open the door. My blood ran cold. My mother lived 3 states away, and I had talked to her on the phone just that morning. There was no way she was standing outside my apartment in the middle of a storm. The knock came again, louder this time. Sam, please. It's not safe out here. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The voice didn't stop, growing more insistent. Sam, open the door. What's wrong with you? I clapped my hands over my ears, trying to block it out. The voice wasn't hers, it couldn't be. But the way it spoke, the tone, the inflection, it was perfect. Too perfect. Then it changed. The voice shifted, becoming deeper, more distorted. Open the door, Sam, it said, the words stretched and wrong. I just want to talk. The handle rattled, and I stumbled back, clutching the knife tighter. Leave me alone, I shouted, my voice cracking. For a moment, everything went silent. No knocking, no voice, just the sound of the rain pounding against the windows. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was gone. But then I heard it again. Not from the door this time, but from the living room. A soft tapping, coming from the window I had just locked. Tap, tap, tap. The tapping at the living room window was soft, almost polite, as though whoever or whatever was on the other side wanted to be let in without causing a scene. My breath hitched as I stood frozen in the hallway, the kitchen knife trembling in my hand. I didn't move. I didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. I prayed it was just my imagination, a stray branch brushing against the glass. But the tapping came again, louder this time, in a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Summoning every ounce of courage I could muster, I crept back toward the living room. My footsteps were slow and deliberate, each one a battle against the dread threatening to swallow me whole. The room was dark now. The storm had knocked out the power completely. Only the faint glow of lightning illuminated the space, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the walls. When I reached the doorway, I stopped and pressed my back against the frame, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles ached. I could hear the rain pelting against the window, mingling with the tapping. My pulse thundered in my ears as I forced myself to peek around the corner. The blinds were still drawn, but I could see the silhouette of something standing on the other side of the glass. It was tall and impossibly thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as though trying to peer inside. The faint glow of its hollow eyes pierced through the slats, scanning the room like a predator searching for prey. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, in a voice that made my blood run cold, it spoke. Sam. It wasn't my mother's voice this time. It wasn't even human. The sound was guttural and wet, like something choking on its own words. Let me in. My breath caught, and I pressed myself harder against the wall, hoping it couldn't see me. The thing outside shifted slightly, its elongated fingers brushing against the glass. Sam, it repeated, dragging out the word. I know you're there. I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to stifle the panic threatening to escape. My mind raced, replaying the emergency alerts. Lock all windows. Stay indoors. Do not investigate noises. I had done everything right, or so I thought. But now it was here and it knew my name. A sudden burst of thunder shook the apartment, and I flinched, the knife slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. The sound seemed deafening in the silence that followed, and I immediately regretted it. The creature outside stiffened, its head snapping toward the source of the noise. For a moment, I thought it might smash through the window and end this nightmare then and there. But instead, it did something worse. It laughed. The sound was high-pitched and shrill, like nails on a chalkboard, echoing in a way that didn't seem possible. My stomach churned as I realized it wasn't just laughing. It was mocking me. You're scared, it said, the words dripping with malice. I can smell it. I scrambled to pick up the knife, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it again. The creature's laughter faded, replaced by a long, low growl that sent shivers down my spine. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the tapping stopped. I waited, my entire body tense, listening for any sign of movement. The only sound was the storm raging outside, the wind howling like a banshee. I dared to hope that maybe it had given up, that it had moved on to another house, another victim. But then I heard the creak. It was faint, but unmistakable, the sound of a floorboard shifting under weight. Not outside, inside. The knife felt woefully inadequate as I turned toward the hallway, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The shadows seemed to shift and writhe, playing tricks on my mind. I strained to hear over the storm, every nerve in my body on high alert. Another creak, closer this time. My grip tightened on the knife as I took a cautious step toward the sound. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel, the darkness at the other end thick and impenetrable. I could feel the weight of the creature's presence, even though I couldn't see it. Sam, the voice called again, now coming from somewhere deeper inside the apartment. It was softer now, almost a whisper, but no less terrifying. You can't hide. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything but stand there frozen in terror. But I knew that making noise would only draw it closer. My only chance was to stay quiet, to stay hidden, and hope it wouldn't find me. The creaking stopped. I held my breath, waiting for the next sound. Seconds passed, each one stretching into an eternity. I could feel sweat trickling down my back, my muscles aching from the tension. Then, from the darkness, I saw it. A hand, if you could call it that, emerged from the shadows, its long, spindly fingers curling around the edge of the wall. The skin was pale and slick, like something that had been submerged in water for too long. Each finger ended in a sharp, black claw that gleamed in the faint light. I stepped back instinctively, my foot hitting the edge of the coffee table. The sound was small, but it was enough. The creature's head emerged next, its glowing eyes locking onto mine. It grinned, its mouth filled with rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. "Found you," it hissed. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted down the hallway, skidding into the bathroom and slamming the door shut behind me. My hands fumbled for the lock, my fingers trembling so badly it took 3 tries to turn it. Outside, the creature's laughter echoed through the apartment, louder and more frenzied now. It knew I was trapped, and it was enjoying every second of it. The bathroom was pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of my phone. I clutched the knife tightly, my back pressed against the door as I listened to the creature's slow, deliberate footsteps approaching. "Sam," it crooned, dragging out the word. "You can't stay in there forever." The door rattled as it tested the handle, and I bit back a scream. Then, to my horror, I realized something. The bathroom window was still open. Panic surged through me as my eyes darted toward the bathroom window. It was cracked open, just a sliver, but in that moment it might as well have been wide open. My mind raced through the emergency alert. "Lock all windows. They are attracted to open windows." The creature's rattling at the bathroom door stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I strained to hear anything. Footsteps, breathing, even the storm outside. But the apartment had gone eerily quiet. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Slowly, I turned toward the window, heart hammering in my chest. The small opening was pitch black, the storm clouds blotting out any moonlight. Rain trickled down the glass in erratic patterns, distorting the view outside. And then I saw it, a faint glow in the distance. 2 hollow, white orbs, steadily growing brighter as they moved closer. It was circling. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The creature had left the hallway and was now outside, drawn to the open window. I felt a sickening mix of relief and dread. Relief that it wasn't trying to break down the bathroom door, and dread because now it knew exactly where I was. I had seconds, maybe less. Without thinking, I lunged for the window and slammed it shut, twisting the flimsy latch into place. My hands trembled as I shoved a towel into the gap at the bottom, trying to block out even the smallest sliver of light. "Too late," a voice whispered from outside. I froze, my hands still on the towel. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was no mistaking the malice beneath it. Slowly, I backed away from the window, clutching the knife so tightly my fingers ached. The glow of the creature's eyes grew brighter, its silhouette now visible through the rain-streaked glass. It was crouched on the fire escape, its skeletal frame impossibly contorted. Long, spindly fingers tapped against the window pane, each tap sending a shiver down my spine. "Sam," it hissed, drawing out the word like a song. "Why are you hiding? Let me in." I shook my head, bile rising in my throat. The thing tilted its head, as if curious, before its grin widened to an inhuman degree. "You can't stay in there forever," it said, its voice dripping with mockery. "I'll wait." The creature pressed its face against the glass, its hollow eyes staring directly at me. I took another step back, my mind racing. I couldn't stay in the bathroom. It would only be a matter of time before it broke through the window. But leaving the room meant running back into the apartment, where it could corner me again. A soft crack drew my attention back to the window. My blood ran cold as I saw thin spiderweb fractures spreading across the glass where the creature's claws pressed against it. It wasn't trying to get in yet, just testing the barrier, like a predator playing with its prey. I couldn't wait any longer. Clutching the knife, I took a deep breath and swung the bathroom door open. The hallway was dark and silent, but I didn't trust it. The creature could move faster than anything I'd ever seen. It could be anywhere. I edged out of the bathroom, every muscle in my body screaming to run. The air felt heavier, as though the storm itself had seeped into the apartment. Shadows flickered and shifted with each flash of lightning, making it impossible to tell where the creature might be hiding. The living room was my only chance. If I could get to the front door, maybe I could make a run for it. The thought of going outside was terrifying, but staying in the apartment felt like a death sentence. The sound of glass shattering ripped through the air. I turned just in time to see the bathroom window explode inward, shards raining down as the creature lunged inside. Its movements were impossibly fast, its long limbs stretching and twisting as it landed on the bathroom floor. I didn't think, I just ran. My bare feet pounded against the hardwood as I sprinted down the hallway, the knife clutched in one hand and my phone in the other. Behind me, I could hear the creature's guttural laughter, its claws scraping against the walls as it gave chase. "Sam!" it crooned, the sound distorted and echoing. "Don't run. It'll only hurt more." I burst into the living room, the storm outside momentarily blinding me as lightning flashed through the closed blinds. The front door was just ahead, the deadbolt still in place. My hands fumbled as I unlocked it, the sound of the creature's footsteps growing louder behind me. As I threw the door open, a gust of wind and rain slammed into me, nearly knocking me off my feet. I hesitated for a split second, the darkness outside feeling just as threatening as the monster inside. Then I heard it, the low, guttural growl just inches away. I didn't look back. I bolted out the door and down the stairs, the cold rain soaking me to the bone. The storm was deafening, thunder crashing overhead as I reached the parking lot. My eyes scanned the rows of cars, desperate for anything that could help me. But the lot was empty except for the creature. It was already there, standing in the middle of the lot. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and it smiled. "How?" I gasped, my voice barely audible over the storm. It didn't answer. Instead, it raised one clawed hand and pointed at me. "You can't run, Sam," it said, its voice echoing unnaturally. "You're mine." Lightning flashed, illuminating its full form for the first time. Its body was impossibly tall and thin, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. The skin was pale and glistening, like something pulled from the depths of the ocean. And then it moved. The creature lunged toward me, its limbs snapping into action like a spring-loaded trap. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I turned and ran, my feet splashing through puddles as I bolted across the parking lot. Rain lashed against my face, blurring my vision, but I didn't dare slow down. Behind me, the creature's laughter echoed through the storm, a sickening mix of glee and malice. Its footsteps were impossibly fast, each one closing the gap between us. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The parking lot felt endless, the rows of cars stretching into infinity. My lungs burned, my legs ached, and every instinct screamed at me to keep moving. Lightning flashed, illuminating the world in stark, jagged bursts. In those moments of light, I caught glimpses of the creature, a blur of pale limbs and glowing eyes, moving with an inhuman speed. I reached the edge of the lot and veered into the street, my mind racing for a plan. There had to be somewhere I could go, somewhere safe. But the street was deserted, the storm driving everyone indoors. Every house I passed was dark, the windows tightly shuttered. I stumbled over a crack in the pavement, nearly falling. My phone slipped from my grip and skidded across the wet asphalt. For a split second, I considered stopping to grab it, but the creature's guttural growl behind me made the decision for me. I kept running. Ahead, I spotted a gas station, its fluorescent sign flickering weakly in the storm. The building's interior lights were on, a beacon in the darkness. Hope surged in my chest as I sprinted toward it, my muscles screaming in protest. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss as I burst inside, nearly collapsing onto the tile floor. The clerk behind the counter looked up, startled, his mouth opening to say something. But before he could speak, I shouted, "Lock the doors, now!" The clerk hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "What are you? Just do it!" I screamed, slamming my hand on the counter. "Please!" Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he reached for the controls and pressed a button. The doors slid shut, and a faint click signaled the lock engaging. I backed away from the entrance, my chest heaving as I struggled to catch my breath. The clerk, a wiry man in his late 30s, stared at me like I just stepped out of a mental hospital. "What the hell's going on?" he asked, his voice tinged with annoyance. "There's something out there," I gasped, gesturing toward the storm. "It's after me. It's not human." The clerk raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You been drinking or something?" Before I could respond, a sharp thud echoed through the station. We both froze, our eyes snapping to the glass doors. The rain streamed down the glass, distorting the view outside. For a moment, there was nothing, just the storm, relentless and deafening. Then the creature appeared. It stepped into the glow of the gas station sign, its hollow eyes locked onto me. The clerk let out a startled curse, stumbling back against the counter. What is that?" he stammered, his bravado evaporating. "I told you," I hissed, grabbing his arm. "You need to hide. Now." The creature tilted its head, its grin widening as it pressed a clawed hand against the glass. The door rattled under the pressure, the lock holding, barely. "We're safe," the clerk muttered, more to himself than to me. "It can't get in. The doors are locked." As if on cue, the creature's claws scraped against the glass, leaving deep, jagged grooves. The sound sent shivers down my spine, but it didn't break through. Instead, it stepped back, its glowing eyes flicking between me and the clerk. "It's playing with us?" I whispered, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. The clerk shook his head, still clinging to his denial. "No, it can't get in. It can't." The lights flickered, plunging the station into momentary darkness. When they came back on, the creature was gone. The clerk's breathing was ragged as he clutched the counter for support. "Where'd it go?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, scanning the room. Every shadow felt like a potential hiding place, every flicker of light a sign of movement. The sound of glass shattering cut through the air like a gunshot. I whipped around, my eyes landing on the far corner of the station. One of the smaller windows had been broken, jagged shards scattered across the floor. The rain poured in, pooling around the base of the shelves. "It's inside," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The clerk grabbed a metal bat from behind the counter, his hands shaking. "What do we do?" Before I could answer, a low growl resonated through the room. It came from everywhere and nowhere, the sound reverberating in my chest. The creature emerged from the shadows, its tall frame impossibly twisted to fit through the broken window. It straightened slowly, its glowing eyes fixed on us. I backed away, my heart pounding in my ears. "Stay behind me," I told the clerk, raising the knife. The creature laughed, a high-pitched, bone-chilling sound. "Run," it said, its voice distorted and inhuman. "I like it when you run." The creature's words hung in the air, dripping with malice. I stood frozen, the knife trembling in my hand. Beside me, the clerk gripped his bat so tightly his knuckles turned white, his eyes darting between the creature and the shattered window. "Run," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Is it serious?" "Dead serious," I muttered, taking a cautious step back. "But if we run, we have to be smart. It's faster than us, and it knows this place better than we do now." The creature tilted its head, its grin stretching impossibly wide. Its glowing eyes flicked between us, as if savoring our fear. It stepped forward, each movement deliberate and fluid, its claws tapping against the tile floor. I knew we couldn't stay here. The shelves were too open, the space too small. We were rats in a maze, and it was the cat, toying with its prey. "Follow me," I hissed to the clerk, and before he could respond, I darted toward the back of the gas station. "Hey!" he yelped, stumbling after me. The creature's laughter echoed through the room, a twisted symphony of glee and hunger. I didn't look back. My only thought was to find somewhere to hide, somewhere to regroup and think. The stockroom door loomed ahead, slightly ajar. I shoved it open and pulled the clerk inside, slamming it shut behind us. The room was cramped and cluttered, boxes stacked haphazardly against the walls. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows. "What the hell is that thing?" the clerk demanded, his voice cracking. "What does it want?" I leaned against the door, my chest heaving. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not human. It knows my name. It's been following me all night." The clerk's face paled. "Following you? Why the hell did you come here?" "Then, I didn't have a choice," I snapped, my nerves fraying. "I thought it couldn't get inside." As if in response, the creature's voice drifted through the crack under the door. "Sam," it crooned, the sound distorted and echoing. "I can smell you." The clerk let out a strangled sound, backing away from the door. "We're screwed. We're so screwed." "Shut up," I hissed, pressing my ear against the wood. The creature's footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving up and down the aisles outside. It was searching for us, savoring the hunt. I turned to the clerk, my mind racing. "Is there another way out of here? A back door? A window?" He shook his head frantically. "No, this is it. We're trapped." The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. The creature's claws scraped against the door, a slow, deliberate sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Come out, Sam," it whispered, its voice barely audible. "I just want to talk." The clerk looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. "What does it want with you?" "I don't know," I said, gripping the knife tightly. "But I'm not about to find out." The scraping stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the flickering light above us. The creature was still out there. I could feel it. "Stay here," I whispered, taking a cautious step toward the door. The clerk grabbed my arm. "Are you insane? You can't go out there. If we stay here, it'll break down the door," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. "I need to buy us some time." Before he could protest, I slipped out of his grip and cracked the door open, just enough to peek outside. The gas station was eerily quiet. The shelves cast long shadows, their contents untouched. Rain continued to hammer against the windows, but the creature was nowhere in sight. I stepped into the room, knife at the ready. My footsteps were silent, my senses hyper-aware. Every flicker of light, every creak of the floor, set my nerves on edge. The creature's voice came from behind me, soft and mocking. "Looking for me?" I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The creature was standing just a few feet away, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. It had been waiting, lurking in the shadows. I slashed at it with the knife, but it moved faster than I could react, its clawed hand knocking the blade from my grasp. Clattered to the floor, spinning out of reach. The creature grinned, its jagged teeth glinting in the flickering light. "You can't fight me, Sam," it said, stepping closer. "You belong to me now." Panic surged through me as I stumbled backward, my eyes darting around for anything I could use as a weapon. My hand found a metal shelf, and I yanked it down, sending cans and boxes tumbling toward the creature. It let out a shriek of annoyance, momentarily distracted. I seized the opportunity and bolted toward the front of the gas station, my only thought to get as far away from it as possible. The clerk was nowhere to be seen. "Where are you?" I called, my voice trembling. A faint sound came from the stockroom, the scrape of claws against tile. I turned toward the noise, dread pooling in my stomach. The creature had circled back, and it wasn't alone anymore. From the shadows, I saw them, more glowing eyes, more twisted forms. The creature had brought others. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't a hunt. It was an invasion. The sight of the additional creatures froze me in place. Their glowing eyes pierced through the shadows, each pair a silent predator waiting to pounce. The one that had been stalking me stepped forward, its grin wide and triumphant. "They came for you," it said, its voice dripping with satisfaction. "They smelled your fear." I stumbled back, my body shaking uncontrollably. "What do you want?" I demanded, though my voice wavered. The lead creature tilted its head, as if amused. "What do we want? We want you to stop running. It's so much more enjoyable when you stop running." I didn't wait for it to elaborate. My instincts screamed for me to move, to act before they closed the gap. I bolted toward the counter, my eyes scanning for anything that could be used as a weapon or an escape. The creatures reacted instantly, their distorted limbs unfolding as they rushed after me. Their movements were chaotic, inhuman, like marionettes jerked by invisible strings. Behind the counter, I spotted the clerk's bat lying on the floor. Without hesitation, I dove for it, the slick tile nearly sending me sliding into the shelves. I grabbed the bat just as the lead creature lunged, its clawed hand swiping inches from my face. I swung the bat with all my strength. The sound of metal striking bone echoed through the gas station as the creature reeled back, a guttural snarl escaping its throat. "Come on!" I shouted, gripping the bat tighter. My voice was louder than I expected, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and sheer desperation. "You want me? Let's go." The other creatures hesitated, their glowing eyes flicking between me and their leader. For a moment, the room was eerily still, the only sound the pounding rain against the windows. Then the lead creature laughed. "Oh, Sam," it said, straightening as though the blow hadn't fazed it. "You're brave. I'll give you that." Its laughter spread to the others, a haunting chorus that filled the room. My hands tightened around the bat, my knuckles white. The creatures began to circle me, their movements slow and deliberate. My back pressed against the counter, the cold metal digging into my spine. I knew I couldn't fight them all, not like this. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the emergency exit at the back of the gas station. The sign above it glowed faintly, a beacon in the chaos. I needed a distraction. Swinging the bat wildly, I knocked over a rack of snacks, sending bags of chips and candy scattering across the floor. The creatures flinched at the sudden noise, their laughter momentarily silenced. Seizing the opportunity, I sprinted toward the emergency exit, my heart pounding in my ears. The door flew open with a deafening clang, and I stumbled into the storm. The rain hit me like a wall, soaking me instantly. Lightning lit up the night, revealing the empty parking lot and the dense woods beyond it. I didn't stop to think. The creatures were right behind me, their guttural growls growing louder with each step. I plunged into the woods, the wet earth sucking at my shoes as I ran. The trees closed in around me, their branches clawing at my arms and face. The storm muffled the sound of my footsteps, but it also masked the creatures' movements. I couldn't tell how close they were, only that they were still following. "Keep going," I muttered to myself, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Don't stop." The forest felt endless, each step taking me deeper into the darkness. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I pushed on. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw their glowing eyes in the distance, relentless and unyielding. Then I tripped. My foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, the bat slipping from my grasp. Pain shot through my ankle, but I bit back a cry, knowing any noise would give away my position. I scrambled to my feet, panic surging as I realized the creatures were closing in. Their eyes were brighter now, their distorted forms visible through the trees. I grabbed the bat and limped forward, each step a struggle. The rain was heavier now, turning the ground into a slick, muddy mess. My thoughts were a chaotic blur, every instinct screaming for a way out. And then I saw it. A structure loomed ahead, barely visible through the storm. It was an old cabin, its roof sagging and its walls weathered by time. The windows were dark, the front door hanging slightly ajar. I hesitated for only a moment before making my way toward it. The cabin smelled of damp wood and decay, the air thick and suffocating. I shoved the door shut behind me, bracing it with a nearby chair. My hands shook as I backed away, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. It was empty. A single lantern sat on the table, its glass cracked but intact. I fumbled with the matches beside it, my fingers trembling as I struck one and lit the lantern. The soft glow illuminated the small space, revealing a room cluttered with old furniture and broken tools. I dragged a heavy dresser in front of the door, my muscles straining with the effort. It wouldn't hold for long, but it was better than nothing. The creature's growls echoed outside, growing louder by the second. I gripped the bat, positioning myself near the back of the cabin. My mind raced, searching for a plan, a way to survive. The first crash came moments later. The creatures were at the door, their claws scratching and pounding against the wood. "You can't hide forever, Sam," the lead creature's voice called, muffled but still audible. "We'll find you." I tightened my grip on the bat, my jaw set. "Come and get me," I muttered, my voice steady despite the fear twisting in my gut. The door splintered, the dresser shifting as the creatures pushed against it. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room, and for a brief moment, I saw something else. A trapdoor in the floor, partially hidden beneath an old rug. Hope flared in my chest as I scrambled toward it, pulling the rug aside. The trapdoor was heavy, its hinges rusted, but I managed to lift it just as the dresser gave way. The creatures poured into the cabin, their glowing eyes locking onto me. I jumped. I landed hard, the impact jarring my knees as I hit the packed dirt floor below. Darkness enveloped me, thicker than the storm outside. The trapdoor slammed shut above, muffling the guttural growls and scraping claws of the creatures as they surged into the cabin. My hands scrambled in the darkness, searching for something, anything, to brace the door. My fingers brushed against a rusted iron bar lying nearby. With every ounce of strength, I wedged it into place, securing the trapdoor just as something heavy thudded against it. The creatures hissed and snarled, their voices seeping through the cracks. "You can't stay down there forever, Sam," the lead one called, its tone almost amused. "We'll be waiting." The sound of claws raking against wood sent a shiver down my spine. I backed away, gripping the bat tightly, my breathing shallow and uneven. The flickering lantern light from the cabin above barely seeped through the edges of the trapdoor, leaving me in near total darkness. I had no idea what was down here or how far it went. The air was damp and stale, carrying a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat. My pulse thundered in my ears as I slowly felt my way along the wall, the dirt cool and rough beneath my fingertips. Every step was tentative, my senses on high alert. The faint echoes of the creatures above grew distant, replaced by the oppressive silence of the underground. Then I heard it, a faint dripping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, echoing from deeper within the tunnel. It wasn't rain, it was something else. I debated staying near the trapdoor, but the thought of those creatures breaking through was enough to push me forward. My only chance was to find another way out. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder with each step. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dimness, picking out vague shapes in the darkness. Roots snaking through the walls, jagged rocks jutting from the floor. The dripping sound grew louder, accompanied by a faint, otherworldly hum. "What is this place?" I whispered to myself, the sound of my own voice oddly comforting in the silence. The tunnel opened into a cavern, the space vast and echoing. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, and a pool of water shimmered faintly in the center, reflecting an eerie green glow. At first, I thought the glow was from the water itself. But then I saw them, symbols etched into the walls, pulsating faintly with light. The markings were intricate, twisting and curling in patterns that seemed almost alive. I stepped closer, my breath hitching. The symbols radiated a strange warmth, their glow intensifying as I neared. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, reaching out to touch one of the markings. The moment my fingers brushed the surface, a sharp jolt shot through me, like static electricity. Images flashed in my mind, brief, disjointed glimpses of something ancient and malevolent. A monstrous figure towering over a desolate landscape, its hollow eyes burning with the same green glow as the symbols. I stumbled back, my heart racing. This wasn't just a random tunnel. It was something else entirely. Something far older and far more dangerous than I'd imagined. The sound of the creatures above brought me back to the present. Their voices were growing louder, more frantic. They'd found the trapdoor. My time was running out. I scanned the cavern, searching for another exit. On the far side of the room, a narrow passageway led deeper into the earth. It was small, barely wide enough to squeeze through, but it was my only option. Clutching the bat, I made my way toward it, every instinct screaming at me to stay alert. The passage was even darker than the tunnel before it, the air heavy and suffocating. The hum of the cymbals faded as I moved further away, replaced by a low, rumbling sound. It felt like the earth itself was alive, its heartbeat echoing through the stone. Suddenly, the passage widened into another chamber. This one was smaller but far more unsettling. In the center of the room stood an altar, carved from black stone and covered in the same glowing symbols. Strange objects surrounded it. Bones arranged in spirals, jars filled with unidentifiable substances, and a cracked mirror leaning against the far wall. The hum was louder here, resonating in my chest. As I approached the altar, a chill ran down my spine. The symbols on its surface pulsed in time with the rumble beneath my feet, as though the two were connected. Then I saw it. A figure stood in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the faint glow. It was taller than the creatures above, its form obscured but unmistakably humanoid. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its voice deep and resonant, reverberating through the chamber. I froze, the bat slipping from my grasp. What are you?" The figure stepped into the light, and my blood ran cold. Its eyes were hollow like the creatures, but its presence was far more commanding. It exuded an aura of power, its form shifting and flickering like a mirage. "I am the reason they hunt you," it said, gesturing toward the symbols. "You woke me." I stammered, backing away. "I didn't mean to." The figure tilted its head, its expression unreadable. "Intent does not matter. You have crossed into my domain. You have seen what you should not." The rumbling intensified, the ground trembling beneath my feet. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The figure's grin widened, revealing jagged, glowing teeth. "You'll find out soon enough." The chamber began to collapse, chunks of stone falling from the ceiling. The passage behind me was gone, blocked by rubble. My only way out was through the figure. It raised a hand, and the symbols on the altar flared to life, their light blinding. The ground gave way beneath me, and I fell, the darkness swallowing me whole. I woke up in the middle of the forest, the rain still pouring. The creatures were gone, the cabin nowhere in sight. My phone was in my pocket, its screen cracked but still functioning. An emergency alert blinked on the screen. "Lock all windows. Do not let them in. This is not a test." My reflection stared back at me from the screen, but something was wrong. My eyes, they were glowing,